And hello again, and welcome to my garage. And here we have my Norley, which I did a lot of work on about a year ago, and since then it's sat here pretty much unused. And the reason for that is because I've got quite a lot of bikes and not much time to ride them, and because this bike here, my Norley, I've still got a few issues with it, in particular the oil leaks. I've got at least 3 that I know of. I've just left it here and it's been going dusty ever since. And so in this video, which is probably going to be the first of about 3 videos, we're going to cover some work I want to do right now this year, and those updates are going to be quite simple but quite expensive, because I want to upgrade various parts of the bike that I couldn't afford to do when I first built it about 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah, so and also of course I want to hopefully correct all the oil leaks that I can find. I mean, I know where 2 of them are from, but maybe there's more, who knows. Yeah, so now here we are, and in this first video I'm going to concentrate on the suspension. And at the risk of repeating myself, because I've mentioned it in more than one video in the past, I want to upgrade these rear shocks here. Now these are YSS shocks, pretty good value for money. They cost about £140, something like that. And there's nothing wrong with them. On a standard Harley or whatever, they'll do just fine for cruising around. But I think this bike deserves something a bit better. And what I want is to have adjustable preload, of course, but I also want adjustable damping, and I also want the whole shocks to be about 30mm or 35mm longer, because I think these shocks are slightly too short. Now these shocks are the standard height for a Harley Sportster, because this bike is basically built around the Sportster engine, and some of the fitments are from a Sportster, even though of course the frame is a Norton featherbed replica. Yeah, so this is something I wanted to do ever since I built the bike, as I say, quite a long time ago now, but I've never had the time or the money to make those changes. But now I do have the time, and I do have some money, so what to do? What should we change them to? And I've actually been through this whole process already with my Guzzi project. Same sort of problem. I had YSS shocks on it. I wanted something better, something longer, with adjustable damping and so on, and I actually wanted custom built shocks. And I found a fantastic pair made by Hagon, and they're called Nitros. And if you go back and look at my Guzzi project series, I'll actually put up a link just to show you where that particular episode is. I went through all the pros and cons of those shocks and what I like about them and why I bought them. But essentially, they're custom made in the UK, and they have stainless steel bodies, stainless steel springs, which in my case I had black powder coated from the factory, and they're the length that I wanted, again custom built, and also of course they have adjustable preload and a 10 position adjustable damping as well. So you think, oh great, okay, if you like those on the Guzzi, then get them for the Norley. And I would have done, except they have one small problem, or rather not a small problem, a big problem, which is the fact that they're actually quite fat. The bodies are quite fat and the springs are quite wide. And while that suits my Guzzi no problem at all, I don't think it would suit this slim bike here, my Norley. I mean, one thing about a Norley is it's very slim. The frame is slim, the tank's slim, and the engine's slim. Even the tyres are quite slim. So having these fat rear shocks on the bike, I think, wouldn't work in terms of the looks anyway. And even on my Guzzi, which it works quite well on, I did have to space out the 2 silencers to make some room for the shocks. Yeah, so unfortunately I can't use those Hagon Nitros, which is a shame because I do like them. However, I have had a pair of shocks that I've bought, God, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, that have been sitting in the box ever since, and yeah, they were bought actually for this bike. They have all the attributes that I want, but I didn't fit them. And the reason is that I thought they were too modern looking for the bike. However, I think I may have been a bit narrow-minded about those shocks, because let's face it, even though this bike is pretty much a sort of late 60s design in terms of how it looks, the tech on the bike is not from the late 60s. It's got Brembo calipers, it's got disc brakes, it's got 4 pots on the front, and it's got 43mm forks, so it's certainly not sort of the tech from that era. So maybe it'll be okay to fit some shocks that are also much more modern than from that era, or at least look from that era. Anyway, let's get those shocks out, get them fitted to the bike, and then we can stand back and decide whether they work or not. And so I've jacked the bike and taken the weight off these rear shocks and then removed them and tried to fit these rather nice progressive shocks here. But then I hit a problem because they don't fit, which was a bit of a surprise because these came off a sort of Harley show bike, a Sportster based show bike, and that should have the same mounts as these. But then I recalled that that show bike had an aftermarket swing arm, and it also had modified shock mounts at the top to push the shocks out to clear a wider rear tyre. So maybe, just maybe, these, you know, would fit that particular bike, but they don't fit a standard shock mount for a Harley here. Now these are 1/2 inch diameter, and I've measured this one, and it's 12 millimeters. And if you convert 1/2 inch to a metric, you get 12.7 mil, and that's why these don't fit, which is a bit of a blow. So what to do? Well, I suppose I could try and press out this central collar. It's got a steel insert in it, and replace that steel insert with something a little bit wider, because let's face it, it's only a millimetre. And I would try to do that, except for the fact that the anodizing on here is very soft, it's very thin. And even though these have been on a show bike and in that box for quite a while, they've really got some wear on them, little scratches here and there. So I thought of putting these on a press. I'd worried that they'd just get scratched to hell, even if you're going to be careful. So I think I won't bother. And instead, I'm going to have to go and find an alternative shock. And so now, looking at my Guzzi project, and in particular, these Hagon Nitro shocks, which I really like, and they're custom made, as already said, but I dismissed them for the Norley because I felt they were too fat. But maybe again, I'm being a bit narrow-minded there, and so now I'm going to borrow the shock for a short time and try it out on the Norley and see how it looks. And maybe, just maybe, it'll look quite good. We'll see. And now with this shock roughly attached to the bike, the first thing is, and it's good news, there's plenty of room between the silencer and the bottom of the shock. Now I was concerned about that because the springs are quite fat, but as it turns out, look, I've got plenty of room. What I can't do though is I can't attach the top of the shock to the top mount, because these shocks are much longer than I need, and right now I would have to lift up the whole back of the bike with one hand to try and get this shock on the top mount, and I can't do that, I'm not strong enough. And I don't even want to try because the bike's a bit unstable right now. So let me just rest it very gently against the frame like that, and we'll stand back and have a look. I think I'm going to eat my own words here because I quite like that. If we stand back, that shock doesn't overpower the bike at all. It doesn't look out of place. You can see here, compared to a standard one, this white SS shock here, it doesn't look massively different. Yes, it is fatter, it is thicker, but not too much, I think. So that's great news because it means I can now order the perfect shock for the bike with the spring rate I want, the length I want, and I also get, of course, adjustable preload, which I also want. And I'm really pleased with the quality of these Hagon Nitro shocks, and I'm also pleased with the service I got from Hagon. Their sales team are great, and you just go through all the things you need, the bike weight, your weight, the style of riding you want to do, and they'll build you the shock just for your bike, the new. So later on today, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to order a pair of shocks just like this for my Norley. Now you do get lots of options. I could have a polished spring, maybe not. I could also choose to have different colours for the aluminium parts of the shock here. I could have black or gold, or I think blue and red, but I think I'll stick with simple silver, just like these. And so that's great news for the bike, but not such good news for my wallet. But anyway, let's get this off the bike now, and I'll refit these YSS shocks for the time being, because right now the bike's teetering on its lift there. And now here we are, a week later, Barney, and we've got another parcel, haven't we, lad? And this time it's from Hagon. And in here, hopefully, we should have the shocks for my Norley. Now these should look pretty much the same as the shocks I've got on my Guzzi, except of course the spring rate and the damping and so on are different, as indeed as is the length of the shocks overall. So let's look in here now. Barney's not too impressed, ain't that, eh? Let's push that down there. What's that? Sorry, lad, no tricks for you today. Yeah, so here they are. You've even got some stickers as well, look. Some free stickers. And here we have, yep, the Hagon Nitro shocks for the Norley. These obviously have custom built spring rate length and also I think damping as well. So now we've got to leave Barney alone for a while. Let me put that back in there. A little sleep, and I'll take these to the garage and we'll get them on the bike. And as if by magic, there they are on the bike. No great problems fitting them. I did actually replace the fasteners with stainless, of course, as I always do. That's fine, and comparing them with the original white SS shocks, you can see they are quite a lot longer. I think it's about something like 30mm difference. And so, with the rear suspension upgraded, it's now time to turn our attention to the front suspension, these front forks here. Now this upgrade is purely cosmetic, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to repaint these silver fork sliders satin black. And the reason for that is because I don't think the silver works well with the polished aluminium around it. Now, in an ideal world, I would like to have this fully polished too, but for some reason, Shower or Honda or whoever made these forks, they've cast in a very rough finish, so it'll be pretty much impossible to get these fork lowers polished up. So I'm going in the other direction and going for satin black, because I think that'll work quite well with the overall colour scheme of the bike. However, it's a good idea to take careful note of where everything is before you start to rip it all apart. So to that end, I've taken a scribe and I've carefully scribed a mark around the base of this clamp, so that when I come to put it back on again, I'll know the exact height it needs to go at. And also the route this speedo cable takes between the fork and the caliper and up to the speedo. It seems obvious now, but when it's all in bits, it may not seem so obvious. So it's also a good idea to take careful notes of where everything goes. And now I've given these fork legs a good clean and degreased them. And I've also masked off the top here, so now I can paint them using this stuff. It's Simonese satin black, so-called tough paint. Now I used this on some engine cases a while ago, and I must say I was very impressed with it. So let's get started. And there's the first coat done. I've now got to wait about half an hour before the next coat goes on, and I think I'll do 3 coats altogether. And once that's done, I've then got to wait, let's see, 24 hours to let the paint harden off completely before I can put everything back together again. And now here we are the next day. Front end's back on the bike, and so I can wheel it out and give it a bounce test. I must say these shocks are a lot firmer than the old shocks that were on the bike, those old white SS shocks, and that's fine because that's what I wanted. The front end was very firm, and now these are too, so the bike's better balanced. Obviously when I ride the bike, get some miles on it, I can tune it back a little bit more, adjust the preload and adjust the damping. But if I go and jump on it now, just a quick bounce test. It is very firm indeed. But overall, yeah, pretty happy with these shocks, and I must say, great value for money, £400. And now, looking at the front of the bike, I'm pretty happy with this satin black finish I've got on the fork lowers. It didn't cost much money, but it did take a fair bit of time faffing around. And I was particularly careful not to scratch it when I'm putting these clamps back on the fork lowers. But so far, so good. Yes, overall, pretty simple changes. It didn't take a lot of time. Okay, 2 or 3 hours to take this thing apart and put it back together again. But apart from that, it's all pretty simple stuff. But the rear suspension is now a lot better, and I'm pretty happy with this finish on the fork lowers. So that's it for this particular episode. In the next episode, we're going to cover the bike's hydraulics and upgrading that area. Both the brake and the clutch, master cylinders, and also the slave cylinders. Yeah, so that's what's next. So for now, thanks for watching, and cheers.